Hi guys! Today I want to have a little chat about reading plays. Reading plays, that's something I do all the time, but obviously I realize that it's not a common thing to do. Even here on YouTube, where some people read just loads and loads of stuff, you very rarely hear someone talking about a play they have read, which I think is quite a shame, especially in the English speaking world where so many plays get published. They're not usually very cheap, but they are easy to get hold of. Obviously, plays are, in the majority of cases, not meant to be read. They were written to be performed, and that's the medium where they can shine the most. So I'm not saying read plays instead of going to see them, but I think it's quite good to be able to read one as well. And as with every art form, it's only beneficial and enriching to understand that art form better. I always like when a shorter work of art, like a very short novel or something, can have a very deep impact. I think that can be just a very powerful statement, and a shorter work of art sort of invites you to read it again. And plays are obviously a prime example of that. You can read one in 2 hours, or you can see a production of something you've already seen and it's so different. I just really adore that this sort of condensed form can have so much packed in there that you can revisit it over and over again and still find new things in that. When you're reading a play, I find that you tend to appreciate different aspects than when you're watching one on stage, so you have to keep that in mind if you want to judge the play just by reading it. It is a certain skill to imagine what are the stage qualities and how to spot them in the text. If you're new to reading plays and you're thinking of trying to read one, it can be easier to grab one that's closer to the forms you know. So nowadays there are quite a lot of plays in monologues, for example. So reading that is very similar to reading a first-person narrative novel. If you'd like to try something like that, I would recommend, for example, a play called Sweeney by Friel, which is a play that's essentially 3 intertwined monologues. And I will put all the names of the plays I mentioned in the description if you want to learn more about them or read them. There are also a lot of plays that resemble a poem. In that category, I would suggest trying, for example, Terminus by Mark O'Rowe, an Irish playwright. Or if you're not from the English-speaking world, one of the most prominent German playwrights, Roland Schimmelpfennig, does something similar. So if you're a German speaker, you might try Der arabische Nacht. If you're a bit apprehensive about reading playtexts, I would definitely suggest starting with something like this, or a verbatim play, something that's heavily based on words, rather than reading a Chekhov play or an Ibsen play straight away, where it can be easier to understand the situations fully when they are played out in front of you on stage. However, if you do need to read a play you wouldn't necessarily pick up yourself, perhaps it's an assignment or something like that, and you find it a little bit confusing, I personally often go back to the character list if it's something slightly confusing. Perhaps it's about an army and there are loads of men with these different functions. I tend to go back to the character list a lot, just to reassure myself in the beginning who everyone is and to pick up their characters really quickly. Or if there was a production of that play, you can Google some pictures from that and sort of imagine seeing that with that cast, so that you can have a face for each name and it's easier to grasp what each character is about. You also have to keep in mind that certain genres work quite differently. So if you're reading, for example, a Shakespeare play, something like The Winter's Tale, I really like all those parts that are in verse about Leontes when I'm reading the text. And then there's that very odd comical interlude and you're just thinking, what the hell is this about? And wishing it to end. But then actually I've seen 2 different productions of The Winter's Tale, and this comical middle bit was just glorious in both of them. So I think it's quite nice to have that experience of reading a few plays and then seeing them, so that you can compare how you felt about certain bits and you can be aware of these things next time. And don't be discouraged if you read a play by an author and you didn't particularly love it. Don't be afraid to look at his other works, perhaps read all the synopses of his other works and something may speak to you more. I personally don't really have any favorite authors. Well, no, that's not true. I do have favorite contemporary playwrights, people that I sort of follow and watch out for anything new they're doing. But amongst the classics, I don't really have a favorite. I adore, for example, this particular play by Chekhov, this play by Ibsen, this one play by Luigi Pirandello, but I don't have to necessarily adore everything else they've done. So this is just how I go about it. Obviously you can read whatever you want or not read, you know. These were just a few tips from me. If you do read plays, sometimes I would be curious to know what you like or don't. And I will see you next time. Bye!